And Annamaya Kosha literally means like food body. So it's food that kind of feeds this physical body. But from a spiritual sense, I'm trying to get away from this body. I would be happy to let this body go and never have to have another body, you know? I'm sick and tired of this body, this pathetic body that gets sick, that has pain, that all of this stuff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quest for Peace. I'm your host, Saju Vaswani, and today I have a guest who is the founder of Lotus Blooming Herbs. Now, he is dedicated to provide authentic and pure Himalayan Shilajit and other Ayurvedic products. I'm very excited to speak with him because, as you all know, that Infinite Love is now a healing center, and we're looking for everything possible to help heal ourselves. So please welcome Johan Health. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so grateful that you are here. And the last time I spoke with you, you gave me so much information. And I thought, oh my God, I need to share this with all my friends and relatives, and also to all our followers here on the podcast. So let's start the conversation by telling me what made you start this. How did this all begin? I mean, you didn't wake up one day or were born with it. Like, something made you want to look into this.
How much time do we have?
Well, let's make it a little short.
Okay, I'll do my best, and please feel free to cut me off at any point if I start going on a tangent, because I tend to do that.
Okay.
So I was in India in 1999 studying Tibetan medicine, originally with a doctor named Dr. Yeshi Dondan, who was the Dalai Lama's personal physician. That's when I first heard about Shilajit. Shilajit it's a very famous, a kind of legendary substance that's found in rocks in India, in the Himalayas, that's used in Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine. So anyways, I heard about Shilajit while studying Tibetan medicine because they use one particular grade of Shilajit in quite a few different formulas. While I was in that village, there was a lifetime retreater who had just come out of, I believe it was a 17-year cave retreat. And obviously there's very few people like that. They're very kind of difficult to meet. And everyone in the village was talking about him. And so I just walked up to him one day and asked him if I could buy him a chai. And he said yes, and we became friends, and we started having chai every day. And most of our conversations were, you know, quite mundane, lots of humor, nothing intense or profound. But then one day he pulled out like a Kodak, if some of your listeners are old enough to remember film, it was like one of those plastic Kodak containers, and there was this black tar inside, and he opened it up and took some out and put it in my chai, you know, and said, try it. And I was like, I'm not trying that. I thought it was like black tar heroin. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? Is he trying to, you know, drug me? And he's like, well, it's Shilajit. And then he started telling me about it. I tried it. I have some in my tea right now. I immediately felt like an energetic vibration throughout my entire body. And I immediately became obsessed. And I said, where did you get this? And he said, and the first thing he said is, don't buy it in the market. It's all fake, right? So the next day I immediately went to the market, ignoring his advice, and bought some. And sure enough, it was not the same thing that I had tried. And in fact, it made me kind of sick. So that was the first time that I was kind of exposed to it. And then I realized, yeah, this is something that you just can't get easily. You know, years later, I was studying Chinese medicine with a man named Dr. Paul Pitchford. He wrote a book called Healing with Whole Foods. So I was studying with him, and we were studying 5-element theory, yin-yang theory, and he mentioned Shilajit in one of the classes. And I said, oh, I've had that. And he said, no, you didn't. You thought you had it. What you had was something that was fake. He said, this is a legendary substance. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. And I said, I'm pretty sure it was the real thing. And I told him about the yogi, et cetera, et cetera. And he kind of dismissed it and said, no. He just assumed I had that market grade, you know, fake Shilajit. And that kind of lit a fire under my belly. And I was like, I'm going to prove him wrong, you know. So really, my discovery of genuine, authentic Shilajit came out of a resentment. I was kind of angry that Paul had, disbelieved me and I was going to prove him wrong. I went back to India. I then started studying Ayurvedic medicine at that time. And I ended up with a doctor named Dr. Jay Sangvi in Gujarat. And I asked him about Shilajit. And he said, well, yes, it does exist. It's very hard to find. There's 4 different grades and they're all used for different imbalances. And if you want to find it, you would have to go here and here and here and here. And he took out a map and showed me these different areas where you find these different grades of Shilajit. And I said, well, I'm going to go there. And he said, no, you can't just go there. He said, this is like some of the most remote areas on earth, very high altitude. And I went to Delhi. I got an Enfield, which is the oldest motorcycle company in the world. And I loaded it up and I hired a mechanic to teach me how to take it apart and put it back together. And I went into the mountains, and that began my journey and my expedition to find real Shilajit. And I spent 6 years forming relationships with the indigenous people in those areas who have been collecting and using Shilajit for thousands of years, learned a lot about it, and eventually formed a partnership with another Tibetan doctor in one of those areas whose family had been collecting Shilajit for more than 500 years from the same source. And it was a particular grade of Shilajit, gold grade Shilajit, which is what I was kind of looking for, because that grade is the only grade that's suitable for everyone to take as sort of like a supplementary thing in your diet. Most of what you read online about Shilajit when people Google it is information about gold grade Shilajit. Most of what's available to purchase online is not gold grade Shilajit. It's extremely rare, expensive, and very, very hard to find.
You're extremely courageous to go up there and determined to do something. That's amazing. But tell me something. What I wanted to know is what made you go into Ayurvedic medicine? Was there a trauma that you went through? Usually something happens that changes your trajectory into a different life, because you're from the United States. So what happened there to make you want to do this?
I live in the United States. I'm from Canada.
Okay.
Important point. Yes, I was born and raised in British Columbia in Canada. It's interesting that you ask that, because there's this, what's that term? The wounded healer.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, I have actually experienced quite intense and profound trauma in my life. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic from the age of 8 years old.
Wow.
Until I was, and so 53 years old now. I've been clean and sober for 22 years. This December, God willing, I'll be 23 years clean and sober. Interestingly enough, if you look at my Jyotish, my Vedic astrology, if you look at when I was influenced by Rahu, in Jyotish, they call it the wild ride of Rahu. It started when I was 8 years old and it ended literally the day I got sober.
Wow.
That was one of the things that kind of piqued my interest with Jyotish or Vedic astrology. But during that time, I was involved in a criminal element because of the drugs and the alcohol. I went to jail 5 times. I've been beaten many times. I've had guns put to my head several times. I'll spare you the details, but I've been through quite a bit of trauma in my life. And then during that time, I also developed a heroin addiction. And at one point I wanted to get off of the heroin, and I thought I would just go and lock myself up in a monastery in Nepal. So I did that, and I lived in this monastery in Nepal for several months. And during that time, I was able to stay sober. But then as soon as I left the monastery, I very quickly fell back into my old habits. So when I finally got sober, I had a mentor. His name was Milton, and he taught me the secret, not only to staying sober, but the secret to happiness. And the secret to happiness is being of service to others for free and for fun, for nothing in return. So that's what started my kind of interest in learning different healing modalities, not only to heal myself, but also to share that with others. And my current master in India, his name is Dr. Ganesh Shinde. When I studied with him and I did certain practices with him, he asked that I offer something in return for these teachings. And he treats about 500 people a day in India for free and takes nothing in return for it. So I offered that as the same vow, and that I would not take money for helping people with Ayurvedic medicine, like with practicing it. So I still do that to this day. I assist another doctor, Dr. Jayant Lakande, who you've met also. And that's how I give back. But I still needed a livelihood, you know. And what's interesting is that I've always been an actor. I've grown up doing theater, and that's my love, my first love. And I did that for many, many years. While I was learning these different healing modalities, I was doing theater and movies and television and commercials and things like this. And actually, when I started searching for the Shilajit, I had no idea of a business with it at all. I really just wanted to prove Paul Pitchford wrong, you know, and that's what I did. The first genuine Shilajit that I found, it was about 3 kilograms. I took it back in my suitcase, in my backpack. I took it back to the United States. Yeah. And then, and 3 kilograms of Shilajit is enough for, 10 lifetimes, right? So I started giving it away to people. The first person I sent it to was Paul, and said, surprise, you're wrong, and sent it to him and healed my resentment. And then, but I started giving it away to people. I just had so much of it, and I was giving it away to people. And a friend of mine sold raw milk at the farmers market, the Hollywood farmers market. This is when I was living in Los Angeles. And she said, hey, why don't you let me sell some of this stuff? And I said, okay. And we literally were putting it in like little like baggies, like drugs. And, she was selling it at the farmers market in Hollywood. And then after a few months of that, I get a phone call from a reporter from the LA Times. This woman calls me and she's like, are you the guy that goes into the Himalayas on a motorcycle and gets this weird stuff that all these celebrities are taking? And I didn't know that any celebrities are taking it. I assume it was just people at the farmers market. It's Hollywood, so some of those types are going to be there. And I said, yeah, I'm the guy. And she's like, oh, I want to do an interview with you. I want to do a story on it. And I said, okay. And she's like, well, can we just do it right now? And we started talking on the phone. And then at the end of the interview, she said, so what's the name of your company? And I didn't have a company. I wasn't doing anything legitimately, right? I had no company, I had no documentation, nothing. And I said, oh, my company, it's Lotus Blooming Herbs. And the reason I called it Lotus Blooming Herbs is because my email just happened to be lotusblooming@gmail.com. And that was just the first thing that came to my mind. So I tell her this on the phone, and I said, when is this article going to come out? And she said, probably in about 2 weeks. And I said, oh my God, okay. And so I got off the phone, and immediately I had to like register a company. I had a friend of mine in India that did a website for me for $300, because I knew that as soon as this article came out, like people were going to be searching for me and trying to do this, which is exactly what happened. All of a sudden it exploded after that article. And all of a sudden I had a business, and then I had to go back to India, and I spent about another year there kind of working with this family and setting up a supply chain, which is very, very difficult to do. All of our products to this day, I don't work with wholesalers or middlemen or anything like that. So all of the herbs that we use, I have farmers that I've met and that I've dealt with and that I've formed partnerships with. In the case of Shilajit, we have to get it out of extremely remote areas. I mean, it takes forever and we have to get it to another area in India where we can test it, where we, at an FDA registered facility in India, so that we can export it from India. Then we have to import it into the US, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually extremely difficult. And it's one of the reasons that we're still so small, and that we will remain small until the day I die, because it's just impossible to scale something like this.
Yes.
I've been selling Shilajit now for 15 years, and we sell out usually, twice a year, because it's just impossible to keep up.
Right. At our center, we make the tea for whoever comes in to try it out. So that was your first product. We also
Yeah.
talked about Chaiwan Prash. That I have it right here. Can you tell us a little bit about this? You told me a beautiful story about how it was made, and please tell us.
So Chaiwan Prash is a 1,000-year-old Rasayana formula, which Rasayan is something that rejuvenates, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but I always need rejuvenation. And it was cognized by one of the rishis. His name was Chaiwan, and he cognized it in meditation, the formula, as the perfect food. He then ingested it himself every day at 4 a.m. and would meditate for 40 minutes. And it's said that he reduced his age by 10 years.
Wow.
After 40 days. He did that for 40 days. That hasn't worked for me. So, I'm not promising anything. It worked for him, but he was a rishi. I'm not quite at that level yet. I'm still in kindergarten. And prash means to consume artfully in Sanskrit. So that's why it's called Chaiwan Prash. It's one of my favorite things. It's a delicious jam. And I've been going back and forth to India for so many years. And I'd had many different versions of it. And always the best ones are the ones that you find in these villages. The best one I ever had, I found in a village in Kutch, which is quite a remote area in Gujarat, in the far west of Gujarat, on the Arabian Sea there on the coast, on the west coast. And that Chaiwan Prash was handmade by villagers, and you could taste the mantras that had been infused into it, and you could taste the intention with which it was made. And I was just never able to find any Chaiwan Prash like that. There's lots of commercial brands in India. And through studying Ayurveda and learning about Chaiwan Prash and how it's supposed to be made, the Rishi Chaiwan, not only did he cognize the formula, but he also cognized the specific instructions of how it is to be made, which correlate to how it is absorbed into your body. In Ayurveda, for an herb to work in your body, it has to become you. It has to become a part of you. This is one of the problems with the way people are using herbs in the West today. They'll read about an herb like turmeric and they'll say, oh, it's anti-inflammatory, right? And there's all of this data that shows that it's anti-inflammatory. And then they'll go out and take, raw turmeric powder in a capsule that they buy at Costco. And unfortunately, they don't get the benefits they're looking for. And on top of that, they get some things that they're not looking for, because in Ayurveda, all medicines are poison and all poisons are medicine. So turmeric, if taken in its pure kind of powdered form, dried powder form, it's toxic to the liver, right? In Ayurveda, you have to solve for all those things. In the case of turmeric, you have to prepare it, usually cooking it in a fat, as you would know in all Indian cooking, right? This is the way that it should be ingested. We have an anti-inflammatory formula called Sacred Haridra that uses turmeric and saffron. And the way we get around that is that we put it into liposomal form. So we're using a technology which encases all of these molecules in a water molecule, which is then encased in a fat molecule. And this has the same effect of protecting your liver and allowing it to be absorbed into your body and to become you. So in the case of Chaiwan Prash, the way it's designed, because it has like 42 different ingredients, each one of those ingredients has to become you in a very intentional order, which corresponds to the order of your dhatus or your tissue systems, ending in ojas, which is a dhatu that is responsible for your longevity. We're born with a certain amount of ojas. In Chinese medicine, this substance is called jing. This substance has not been identified by Western medicine yet. Some people have theorized that it's cholesterol. But this substance, ojas, is what anchors your spirit into your body, right? And so when you run out of that ojas, your spirit leaves your body and you move on to the next life, right? So as far as building longevity goes, ojas is key. And it's very, very difficult to build ojas. The best, if anybody wants to build ojas out there, the very, very best way is through authentic and determined and regular meditation. right? That's the best. The next best way is through deep sleep, which has become more and more difficult in the current Kali Yuga. And then as far as ingesting things that can build ojas, there's many substances out there that claim that. In actual fact, in my belief, and according to my master, there's only two things that can build ojas. One is Shilajit and one is Chaiwan Prash, right? So I wanted to make real Chaiwan Prash in the authentic way. It has to be made in accordance with the ascending moon cycle. Each herb has to be ground by hand in the appropriate and prescribed mortar and pestle. So for one herb, it might be stone, and for another, it might be copper, and for another, it might be brass, and for another, it might be wood. The hand movements are different. One you might do like this, another you do like this, another you do this way, etc. There's corresponding mantras that go with each grinding of each herb, and then those herbs have to be added in a certain order during that 21-day process in conjunction with the ascending moon cycle. The honey, which is a very important ingredient in the Chaiwan Prash, has to be added at the end, because I'm sure you're aware, honey cannot be cooked. If it's cooked, it becomes a toxin, right? It has to be raw. So this is also this is why you won't find any other Chaiwan Prash products that do this. It's just too labor intensive. You have to wait until the solution cools, and then you have to mix in the honey by hand. It's very, very difficult. So I wanted to do this, and it's only from the blessings of my master that I was able to do this, because I told him, I said, I really want to do this Chaiwan Prash, and he's on the board of one of two genuine Ayurvedic schools in India, where you have students learning this stuff. And I was able to create a partnership with one of those schools where I have the students grinding the herbs, and they're being supervised by the professors, and the professors are grading them on it. So they're doing it the correct way, and they're doing it with the right mantra. Because of course you can't just go to some co-packer in India and say, oh, I want you to make the Chaiwan Prash, and I want you to do it in this way, and I want you to do this mantra. And of course they're going to say yes, 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 but they're a business, so they have to make money, and they're going to do it as quickly as possible. So that's how the Chaiwan Prash came about. And
beautiful.
Anyone that tries it will taste that immediately. You can really taste that vibration that's infused in that Chaiwan.
So you were telling me that it's like a jam. So do you eat it like a jam? Or I know what I do is, what I was taught was to put it in hot water, drink it like a tea. Are there any other ways of doing this, or that's the only way?
Well, in Ayurveda, it's technically what's called a leham, and leham means to lick. So if you want to do it the absolute proper way, you would lick it slowly, a spoonful, and you lick it slowly. Now, in our modern age, I don't do that. I did it for a while. If I was going to use it for meditation practices, then maybe I would lick it slowly before I meditate. But I mean, you're still going to get it in your body, which is the most important thing, any which way you do it. If you're going to use it in tea, obviously you want to make the tea and let it sit for about 3 or 4 minutes, so it's not extremely hot. You wouldn't use like freshly boiled water, because that would cook the honey. But if it's sat for a couple of minutes, it's fine. But yeah, it makes a terrific chai. Like, you just put that in black tea with any kind of milk that you're using, and it's like makes this wonderful, delicious chai. It sweetens it because it's got tea in it. It also has gourd, which is like a prepared whole sugarcane mash. It's the sugarcane, so it's got the sweetness, but it has all the minerals still in it. Yeah.
So in that case, how do you take the Shilajit, and how often? Let's go back to Chaiwan Prash.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you do it? And when you said, let me put two questions. And when you said you can take it before meditation, does it help your meditation, or does it help your body heal better while you're meditating?
So it definitely, both Shilajit and Chaiwan Prash specifically are used in meditative practices. I know that those lifetime retreaters in the caves, it's part of their kit. And really all they're eating is like barley flour mixed with yak butter and Shilajit every day. Shilajit can be taken, sometimes it's nice to take a small amount of it. You only need a very small amount of it, like a rice grain sized portion, it's extremely potent. And you can put that under your tongue and then kind of meditate with it, and you will observe the sensations in your body, right? As it's moving through your body. And it does have a very powerful ability to bring your attention inwards, which is what you need in meditation. And Chaiwan Prash, a similar kind of, they're both rasayanas, they're both rejuvenation substances, right? So they have similar qualities, but just they go about it in different ways. Shilajit, the esoteric understanding of Shilajit is that it's the sweat of Lord Shiva. If you're a Shivite, right, like myself. If you're a Vaishnav, they would say it's the sweat of Lord Vishnu. And then you have to ask, well, why was Shiva sweating? And Shiva was sweating because Shiva was creating the entire universe out of four elements, right? Space, the element of space, Akash, was already there, so he was bringing together these elements, and that effort of creating the universe, the byproduct of that is his sweat, Shvedana, or Sveda. The sweat was the Shilajit. So it's considered to be a divine substance, right? Shiva, of course, as many would know, is a great meditator, right? So if you take that, especially if you're practicing those Shivite practices, it's very, very effective for taking you deep, deep, deep within. And I'm not really authorized to say too much more than that. I also get a little bit, because I sell it, right? I always feel a little bit funny about talking about the esoteric aspects of it, because I don't want to use those as a promotional tactic. I feel like using spirituality to sell something is not right. And so I'm already feeling a little guilty that I even expressed that, but it was in the context you were asking about meditation. So let's just say, yeah, it's what I would say is, find out for yourself. If you have a meditative practice, try it and experiment with it and see what you discover yourself, because you're the royal you, everybody who's out there, you're your own best guru.
That's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. And of course, both of these can help improve your health as well, I'm sure.
Yes, it's generally, look, we are in the Kali Yuga, right? You're familiar with that?
Yes. I'm from India.
Yes.
South, yes.
And the Kali Yuga started, we know that it started, I think it was 3000 BC, around there, about 5,000 years ago, a little more. And, the sad news for all of us is that a yuga is about 432,000 years in length. So, we're all stuck in this age of ignorance, in this age of chaos. The real kind of sign of that is how obsessed we all are with the material, right? You can be obsessed. I mean, part of that is like our diets. That's material. In Ayurveda, this physical body is not that important. It's called the Annamaya Kosha, right? But there's more subtle bodies that you kind of experience through yogas or meditative practices that are more significant, right? Or that are closer to the source, And this kind of physical body is just kind of like the end product of that. And Annamaya Kosha literally means like food body. Mm-hmm. So it's food that kind of feeds this physical body. But from a spiritual sense, I'm trying to get away from this body. I would be happy to let this body go and never have to have another body, I'm sick and tired of this body, this pathetic body that gets sick, that has pain, that all of this stuff. Before we entered into the Kali Yuga, people were much, much smarter than we are now. In fact, they didn't even have to write things down. Somebody could speak something to you and you could absorb that information and integrate it immediately. In fact, they started writing things down about 5,000 years ago because they knew these rishis that wrote the Vedas, they knew how ignorant we were all going to be and how obsessed we were going to be with the physical, the material. And part of that obsession is we're obsessed with our diets and we're obsessed with this body. And we're all trying to avoid, old age, sickness, and death. I always tell people, I'm sorry, like those are the three things in life that you cannot avoid no matter what you do.
Yeah.
We're all going to get old. We're all going to get sick, and we're all going to die. I know that sounds morbid, and taxes are the other one.
Yes, exactly.
So, my philosophy is to accept that and embrace that. And yes, you can do things with your diet. You can do things with these medicines that help. They help. In Ayurveda, we're always trying to find balance, right? And we're all imbalanced all the time.
Yeah.
So it's a never ending quest to try to stay there, and all we can really do is we kind of just do our best. And that. If you're doing your best, that's the best you can do. Personally, I feel that meditation is the most important thing, and then sleep. There's 4 pillars of health in Ayurveda. The first pillar is sleep, right? Because in deep sleep, that's when you're healing yourself, right? And that's the first thing that always has to be addressed. And there's an epidemic in the modern world of bad sleep right now, especially deep sleep. Incidentally, ashwagandha, which is another product that we make.
I was going to talk about that next.
Yeah, if someone listening does have trouble with deep sleep or sleeping through the night, try taking 2 capsules of ashwagandha before you go to sleep. This is very good for inducing deep sleep. Okay. The second pillar of health is digestion. So digestion in Ayurveda, it's called Agni, which means fire.
Right.
If your fire is strong and you eat a poison, it won't hurt you, right? Conversely, if your Agni, your digestion is weak and you eat the healthiest thing on earth, right? Let's say kale, you eat this best quality organic farm grown kale was grown in like volcanic Hawaiian soil. It will become a poison if your digestion is weak. So that's the second pillar of health. The third pillar of health is elimination, not just the elimination that everyone's thinking about in the bathroom, but also sweating, right? And now, of course, Western medicine is catching up with this 5,000 years later and saying, oh, saunas are so good for you, right? Yeah. So eliminating toxins, eliminating poisons, so that's the third pillar of health. And the fourth pillar of health is menstruation. And that's why women live longer than men. Okay. But you notice that nowhere in there is diet mentioned, or herbs or medicines or anything like that. So these are the things to focus on first, right? If you're a man, you only have to focus on 3, right? And then when those things are in alignment, then you can kind of look at diet and things like this, and medicines, things that you can take to help come back into balance.
But the thing is, our foods right now, the foods that we're getting are not healthy at all, right? It doesn't have everything that we need. And that's why we have to supplement.
The reality is, most of what we eat is poisonous. Even the stuff that's not poisonous is lacking things like minerals. That's one of the things from a Western point of view that Shilajit is very good for. Okay. It contains like 85 plus different trace minerals in plant-based form. These are plants that degraded into this tar-like substance over 55 million years. It's the oldest thing on earth that you can eat. But our plants don't contain those minerals anymore because the soil doesn't contain those minerals, right? So this is just the reality that we have to accept, we have to deal with. But what happens is people get obsessed with, I think they even have there's an eating disorder called orthorexia, which is being obsessed with what you're putting into your body. And we all know people like that. I used to be one of those people. There was a time in my life that I wouldn't eat at restaurants because I didn't know what the mentality of the cook was who was making my food. And I didn't want his energy in my food. This is taking things too far. Okay. This is being obsessed with the self. This is being obsessed with the body and the material, right? This is running in the other direction of spirituality. This is running away from the source, God, the creator, whatever you want to call it. And I've learned this from 2 people. One was Paul Pitchford, who I was speaking about earlier. One time he said to us in class, he said, what's the worst thing you can eat? What is the unhealthiest thing you can eat? What do you think it is? Something that's available that people eat all the time.
Oh, for me? You're asking me?
Yeah. What would you guess?
McDonald's.
You can get it at McDonald's. right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ice cream, right? It's
Oh,
ice cream.
oh, it's the most
Because
unhealthy?
why? It's dairy, very low quality dairy most of the time, right? Which
Okay.
is very mucus forming in Chinese medicine. Mucus is the ground for cancer. It's full of refined sugar, right? Which is also highly inflammatory. And we all know about how bad sugar is. And it's ice cold, right? Anything that's ice cold just destroys your digestion immediately. So when you
Mm,
eat it, you're freezing up your digestion, and then you have no way to deal with this mucus forming low quality dairy combined with high amounts of this terrible refined sugar. Okay. So ice cream's the worst thing you can eat. But if it puts a smile on your face, that smile is so good for you that at that point you have to call it a health food.
wow. Okay.
This is the thing that people forget. They forget about vitamin H, happiness.
Happiness.
Obviously, if you eat ice cream every day, it's not going to be a genuine, authentic smile. But you know what? If you haven't had ice cream in a couple of weeks and you're craving it, and
Yeah.
it's nostalgic because it reminds you of when your uncle used to take you to that ice cream shop on the corner and get you that cone when you were a kid, and it makes you so happy. And then when you get that ice cream, when you taste it, you should really like try to enjoy it, and just and remember that, right? That is the mind matters most. And the second person that taught me that was a monk in Burma, in Myanmar. So I was studying meditation in Myanmar, and I was able to meet a monk who was 108 years old. Okay. And this monk was considered to be a very high level, highly realized meditation master. I was very excited to meet him. And the custom there, when you meet someone like that, is you bring something and give them something.
Mhm.
Okay. And they only eat once a day before 12 noon. And it was past that, it was the afternoon, but they're allowed to drink after that. So I asked his attendant, what can I give him? Is there something I can bring him and give him? And he said, oh, get him a Coca-Cola. He loves Coca-Cola. And I'm like, what? And so I got him this Coca-Cola. I go in, I give him the Coca-Cola. They put a straw in it. And this guy, by the way, 108 years old, he could move his head, no problem. And no exercise at all. All he does is sit all day,
Wow.
meditating, all day long. Right? The maximum amount of exercise he gets is very slow walking. Okay. He's 108 years old. His mind is as sharp as a tack. And I'm sitting there watching him with this big smile on his face. That's one thing I've noticed about the handful of genuine, highly realized people that I have met in my life are always smiling, always smiling, and he's drinking this Coca-Cola with this big smile on his face. And I'm just sitting there. And I said, excuse me, sir, through his translator. I said, do you realize like how bad Coca-Cola is for your health? I said, my country, that's considered really bad for your health. And I'm just wondering how, you look so healthy at this advanced age and you're drinking Coca-Cola every day. And he laughed. He thought it was so funny what I had said. And then he looked at me and he said, mind matters most. And so, and I'm not telling people, because look, none of us are high level, highly realized meditation masters
No,
who meditate for 14 hours a day.
no.
So, but it's an important lesson, right? I think, in that we've all become way too obsessed with ourselves, and our bodies and how we look and all of these things. So I think now that, look, I exercise, I eat well, I take things, I take Shilajit, I even take some vitamins. I get outside as much as possible and walk in my bare feet. All of these things are important. But why do I do that? That's the question. Do I do that because I'm afraid of death? Do I do that because I'm afraid of getting sick? Do I do that because I'm afraid of getting old? Because any decision that's based on fear is the wrong decision. Any decision that is based on fear is the wrong decision. My master taught me that, right? And so no. So I do those things so that I can enjoy the unconditional love that I have for my son as long as possible, right? So that I am capable of sitting for 1 hour and meditating and trying to discover the truth about who I am, really. That's why we do those things. mind matters most. It's the intention that matters. And again, if eating ice cream puts a genuine, authentic smile on your face, then do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've also heard, I've had several gurus in my life. Like I had one main guru, and then I've listened to several. And my guru once told me about meditation and as opposed to worship. And I do a lot of more, mantras and worship and that kind of stuff. And I do meditate as well. But somebody told me, Dadaji said that meditation is more important than worship. And I said, what? Because I do meditate, but not as much. So I went and asked him, and he said, Saju, whatever makes you happy, what makes you happy, do that. That's it. It doesn't matter if it's, but do something. So you're right. I mean, and then Dada Vaswani used to say, be very careful of your thoughts. What you think is going to manifest. It starts here, and then everything goes out there. So that's what you're saying as well.
Yeah. I used to do a lot of Lakota. Do you know who the Lakota are? The Lakota are in indigenous, the first peoples in America. One of the indigenous First Nations. That's where they named like Dakota. North Dakota was named after the Lakota. I used to do some of their practices, and one of their practices is called the Sweat Lodge. And I remember I did it with this guy, Joe. And I remember he told me the secret to happiness. And he said, just don't take yourself so seriously.
Yes. And I there's so much obsession. You're right. I hear a lot of people, oh my God, don't, like you go on internet, you go on Instagram, everywhere. It's about don't eat this and this is bad for you. And
yep.
I literally just turn it off. I don't want to hear this. I want to just do what I want to do and not worry about, I ate this, so this is going to happen to me,
It's changing, it's changing every day. Something came up on my YouTube algorithm the other day. For years, they've been doing this low carb diet, this ketogenic diet,
right.
Which I've always warned people about because I follow, Ayurvedic dietary recommendations, which is completely the opposite of that. And they just came out with this big study, and it was like 70,000 or maybe more even participants. And they're saying that high protein, low carb diet profoundly decreases your life expectancy. So that's the latest thing. It's just constant, I like to follow things that are tried and true, right? Ayurveda is at least 5,000 years old, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, thousands of years old. Things like that have worked for that long. Generally, people are still doing it because it's worked for a really, really long time. There's a lot of different aspects. Like if you start getting into diet and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat, there's so many different factors. So in Ayurveda, the first thing that you have to take into account is time and space, right? So this is 2025. It's not 5,000 years ago, right? And where are you? Well, I'm in Oregon and you're in Texas, right? Very, very different climates. And then you have to consider your ancestry, right? Wow. So all of a sudden it becomes very, very difficult because it's like, well, I have to eat right for this climate and I have to eat right for this modern age, which is they didn't have all this pollution and forever chemicals. None of those existed. Nobody drove cars. Everybody exercised because they walked everywhere, which is the best form of exercise. So they didn't need gyms and all of this stuff, People just worked. That's how they did their exercise. And so, things were very different 5,000 years ago than they are now. It's much more difficult to address all of these different cofactors. Generally speaking, my opinion, just in case anybody is interested, for what it's worth, my unsolicited advice, I think a vegetarian diet is an excellent diet, and whole foods, right, as much as possible. But most importantly, don't worry about it. It's that there's only one cause of disease, and that's stress, right? Only stress. And even Western doctors will accept this, right? Like, for instance, when we talk about cancer, what's the stress? It's some toxin that that has gotten into your body and made this cell become precancerous. And then it needs the kind of fertile soil with which to develop, which is like in Chinese medicine, they'd say like mucus forming foods and all of this stuff, right? And then, but even Western doctors will tell you, I mean, worry is a form of stress, mental stress, right? What's the number one killer in the United States? Heart disease. Okay. And you talk to any cardiologist, anyone, and ask them what's the number one cause of heart disease, and they'll say stress. And that's the first thing they tell you when they see your cholesterol's too high or this or that, or your what's it called, your BP. Yeah, yeah. My wife is Indian also, and all the older people in her family, they're always talking about their BP, and they're checking it all the time. They're always checking their BP. They're check my BP, and just the checking of it is making them worried, right? And I'm like, just relax, be happy.
I had the same issue. I had high blood pressure, and the doctor told me I had to check my blood pressure every 2 or 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, night. And I was really getting frustrated and had to write it all down. And he gave me all these statins, and I didn't want to take anything. So I started going to a functional doctor, and we started figuring it out. I started first with ashwagandha, and that helped. And anything to just relax, adaptogens and magnesium, all of that together, we kept trying until I got the formula that my body needed to not be so stressed. And then I put away the blood pressure machine and say, I'm not even going to look at it, because I know that's what's causing me more stress. Every time I look at it, oh my God, So you're right.
They've done studies. I think when you actually check someone's blood pressure, it goes up just from checking it. But one thing you mentioned that I will say that I think everyone should take is magnesium. There is an epidemic of magnesium deficiency in the modern world. It's just not in the soil. It's not in the plants, and it's very, very difficult to get. So everyone should take that.
Okay, perfect. So tell me, you've done a lot of meditation. We're kind of running out of time, but I'm really interested in knowing this. You've done a lot of meditation. You've met a lot of yogis and all over the place. How often or how long or how important is meditation? I know you've kind of already touched on that. And at Infinite Love, we do have meditation sessions every Wednesday. It's just getting the people to get in here and meditate is a little bit of an issue, because they never seem to have time. What would you say to these people?
So first of all, my own belief is that meditation is not all meditations, right? I mean, ideally you want to be doing something that has a lineage that goes back, that has like teachers behind it, right? So it's because meditation is just a technique. It's just a technique to see who you really are. And there's many different techniques out there, right? The reality is, for us as householders, we're not monks and nuns. We are not going to meditate and become enlightened in this lifetime, right? And what's important is, yes, obviously, the more you do, the better. I've done meditation retreats where I'm meditating for 14 hours a day for many, many, many days on end, right? I've done a lot of those. And yes, you go deep, and you see very, very deep levels of reality, right? Not the reality that we experience now. There's a very positive effect of that as far as like what we were talking about earlier about not taking life so seriously, right? But not everybody can do that. Some people physically, they can't do that, right? And it's okay. I mean, we're talking, my belief system comes from the East, and that system is represented by a circle. A circle has no beginning and no end, samsara. So we're just going around and around and around and around and around. And this is just one lifetime, right? We've had so many lifetimes since beginningless time and endless time, right? Multiple infinite contractions and expansions of the universe, right? So I don't worry so much about, I have to become enlightened. I have to become awakened. And I certainly don't trust anyone who claims that they are awakened. This is a really important thing, because there's so many people out there teaching, and the very, very, very powerful realized master told me this many, many years ago, someone that I studied with. He said, the mark of realization is humility. That's how you know your teacher. And the way you nodded right there, you know this because you've had
Yes.
teachers.
Yes.
And you've seen that in them.
Yes.
So be careful of these people that are saying, I've discovered the meaning of life and I've done this and I've done that. And here's all my past lives and blah, 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 blah. It's all ego. You know, the realized people, they don't care about that stuff at all. And when they look at you, they don't just see you as this single being, this individual in front of them. They see a mountain range. And sometimes the teaching that they give you, it might not seem very important, right? But they're planting a seed because they can see, they have the ability to see that that seed, given the right soil and the right sunshine and the right water, will sprout and it will turn into a tree. And way, way, way down here at the end of this mountain range, it will bear fruit. So we've all got lots and lots and lots of time. The path to truth, the path to the source, the path to peace is a long, long, long path, right? And the thing that meditation will also gives, it also gives benefits in the here and now. So that's another way that you can judge. If you're getting benefits going once a week to the Wednesday session and you get benefits from that, that's good enough. Good enough. And also, Saju, you know, don't forget that those people that are coming, yes, maybe it would be better for them if they did it every day for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. But then, like, what are you going to compare that to? Well, you're doing it an hour in the evening and an hour in the morning. But what if you were doing it every hour and you only took a 5-minute break? That would be better, right? So it's all relative, you know. But I think, you know, the fact that you're even getting people to just get a taste once a week, first of all, it will give benefits in the here and now, profound benefits. I mean, I've heard masters, I'm sure you've heard them say this as well. You know, just one moment of meditative equipoise is equal to hundreds of years of lifespan. You don't focus on the quantity, focus on the quality. And then those seeds that you're planting, if maybe this is the first seed of meditation that someone's tasted, you know, and it's only once a week on Wednesdays, or maybe they only come once, just one Wednesday, still good enough, you know, because that seed is going to sprout and it's going to grow into a tree, and that tree will bear fruit, and that fruit will be delicious.
You know, you almost bring me to tears because you know, you're taking me back to my guru who used to say exactly what you're saying. And I had gone to him once and said that this lady says that she can connect with this spirit or this God, and God is talking to her. And is it true? Because she came with me to visit my guru in India. And I said, she's saying that. Is it true? He just kind of smiled at me. And then he wouldn't say anything. I said, but Dadaji, you need to tell me if it's true or not, because I'm going to be with her in the United States. And so he said the exact same thing. He said, look, the person who says that they can do these things are not the persons who can actually do it. He says, I have, there's so many things you don't know about me. I've never sat and told you I can do this, this, and this. Have I? I said, no. So that's it. That was all I needed to hear. It was awesome. And so that's what I look at.
Because those teachers know that, because look, a lot of these practices, you can develop certain kind of latent powers, cities, right? Telepathy, all kinds of magical things that most people would consider magic. But those things are not awakening, right? And those things can become a hindrance to awakening, because those things, you can become attached to those too. Look at the power that I have. So even sometimes you meet people that have some kind of power, but if they're displaying it and if they're showing it to you and they're like, look at this, I can read your mind, danger, right? That's a red light, in my opinion. And, you know, I always tell people, like, what you just said, like what I was saying was bringing you to tears because it's what you heard from your master. Well, guess what? I heard all of this stuff from my master. Like, none of this is new. I wasn't meditating and I went, oh, yes, that's it. No, it's like, you know, anybody can read this stuff in books too, right? It's just getting outside of ourselves and not feeling like we're so special. The secret to getting outside of yourself is just helping somebody else. just be of service.
Mhm.
You can't think about yourself when you're taking care of someone else. And I've learned that the real hard way, I can tell you.
That's beautiful. Yes, I have to say one more story about my guru. So about what you're talking about, it's dangerous. I told him one
Mhm.
time that I've read in his guru's book, like he had written a book, and I read there that there's a way of getting to this specific point during meditation if you do a certain kind of breath, pranayama kind of breath with the meditation. So I was asking him about it. He says, that is like going on a plane to your destination, or the regular meditation that I'm teaching you, which he was teaching me, is going there by train. He says it's better to go by train. So when you get there slowly, it'll be easier, because with the plane you'll get all these riddhis and siddhis coming to you suddenly, and you'll get stuck because you'll get the ego will get involved, and just forget about that. Just go slow and just do what I'm telling you to do. And as you go slowly, whatever comes to you will be very, in a drop. So it's not going to be. So, I mean, that's beautiful. That's exactly what he said.
Let me say one more thing on that, because
Okay.
I've heard a very similar thing from my master. So, yes, because you know the story of the tortoise and the hare.
Yes.
Who wins the race?
The tortoise.
The tortoise.
Yeah.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yes.
And also, it's safer. That's why these practices that produce these cities, that's why they're secret. They're esoteric.
Mhm.
It's not because they're trying to hide them away from people, right? It's because they're dangerous. Anything powerful is dangerous, you know?
Right. Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of this. So basically, you have 4 products right now. We do have all of the products here at Infinite Love. And if anybody
Mhm.
would like to, well, what we do with your products is we put it into the system, the EE system, so that they are already so powerful. And then you put it in the system, I think that wakes them up a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
So we have those here at Infinite Love. And of course, if they want to contact you or get the products online, they go to
lotusbloomingherbs.com. And for anybody that comes across this video, just use, if you're like a first time customer, there'll be a thing that comes up. It's like a discount code. I think it's like welcome 10, but it should come up on the screen and show you.
Perfect.
And that'll get you a discount.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. What for you, just in a few words, what is a peaceful world to you? What does that look like?
I feel pain when you say that, because this world is so awful right now. And the things that are happening in this world, I mean, the hatred that's being expressed from our government and other governments around the world, and the genocide that's happening right now in the Middle East, in Palestine, the things that I'm seeing on social media are so sadistic and wrong and ignorant. If I'm being honest, I'm at a place in my life right now where I've had many moments of just losing all hope for humanity. I'm so disgusted with what I see on the planet from human beings and what we're doing to this Mother Earth because of our greed and our selfishness. And I don't think that peace is possible on this planet in the human realm without absolute selflessness. Until every human being on earth learns to give instead of take, we're doomed. So I would say, in order to manifest peace, every single one of us has to give instead of take. And I really believe that greed and selfishness is the source of all evil and is at the root of all of the pain and suffering. I know for a fact that karma and sankaras are real, and so it makes sense to be selfless. It makes sense to be charitable. It makes sense to be giving. In fact, it's the most selfish thing you can do. If you really love yourself and you want peace and serenity and happiness within yourself, then you better help others, because there's no other way to achieve that. So I know that's a real long-winded answer, but I feel like it's the only honest thing I can say.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
And I hope and pray that people get that, because I don't see that happening right now. And I'm very, very scared for my child's future. I have a 5-year-old son, and I'm very, very scared of what kind of world he's going to be living in when he's, 20 years old, So just help others. Look, go to any religion, anyone, and look at what their prophets and their teachers have said. It's all the same stuff. Be kind, be tolerant, be forgiving, loving, be compassionate, be generous. It's the same, but you have to practice those things, these qualities, right? You can't just talk about them and then go and judge somebody else because they look different than you, or they have a different religion than you, or they come from a different place and their skin's a different color. And I pray for, our children's sake that we can come out of that.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter too. Thank you. On behalf of all humanity, I thank you for all the work that you have done, the work that you are doing.
Thank you.
Quest for Peace, a podcast about navigating outer chaos with inner harmony. Whether you're seeking solace in the midst of life's challenges or simply curious about the profound connection between inner and outer peace, the Quest for Peace podcast is your guide on this transformative expedition.